those words of introduction. As I listened to him, Dr. Lee describe the year of achievement at Caltech, I really thought the greatest achievement, of course, is you all with your graduations here. And it's really a great honor to address today's degree recipients, both the undergraduates and the graduate students, as you take these final steps in your long educational journey at Caltech. I might note that the few steps that you take today to pick up your diplomas are, I suspect, by far the easiest steps compared to everything else you've done over the last several years to get to this point. I have to tell you, recognizing the extraordinary education here at Caltech, its dedication to research and teaching, and just the strength of this community, which I had the opportunity to observe so closely yesterday, it's a little daunting to be asked to speak at this commencement. But I did find some guidance in the history of the ancient Greek historian Herodotus. You know, people talk today about a clash of civilizations, but that clash has been going on for a long time. Back in 480 BC, there was a clash between Europe and Asia as the Persian king Xerxes, bent on conquest, invaded the great Greek city-states. At one point, the beleaguered island of Samos, threatened with this defeat, dispatched a delegation to Sparta to beg for help. Sparta was a mighty city-state. But the delegation made one of the most greatest errors that you could possibly make. They delivered a really long speech. At the end, the Spartans, their patience sorely tried, explained that they had lost concentration to such a degree that they had paid no attention to the second half of the speech, and the speech had gone on so long, they'd actually forgotten the first half. So I will try not to make that mistake today. The impact of Caltech is so manifold. You owe many things to Caltech as graduates, and some of which you are not even aware of, such as this beautiful late spring day that you and your families are enjoying today. What am I talking about? R.E. Haagen-Smit was a brilliant chemist who taught in this faculty from 1937 to 1971. His great interest was in chemistry of plants. He figured out where the flavor of onion, garlic, and wine came from. He actually discovered the active agent in marijuana, for which it is said there's a statue somewhere in California to him. But his great subject was the chemistry of the taste of pineapples. One afternoon in 1948, he was working in his laboratory on his beloved pineapples when he walked out for a breath of fresh air. Or if you look at that extraordinary dashing photo of the scientist, researcher, Haagen-Smit in my book, The Quest, puffing on a cigarette amidst his test tubes, you might suspect it was for smoke. Anyway, instead of this brilliant sunshine, he found himself engulfed in the dark, noxious smog. It really was awful. Now, everybody was against smog, but there was no agreement on what caused smog. So Haagen-Smit said to himself, I'm a chemist, I'm a Caltech professor, I can figure this out. And he did as he said on the first nickel. It was the incomplete burning of gasoline and auto engines. Well, his discovery started the regulation of auto exhaust, technological innovation, establishment of the California Air Resources Board by Governor Ronald Reagan, first chairman one, R.E. Haagen-Smit, and eventually to the mandate for the development of the electric car, which is now appearing in California roads. So, congrats to Professor Haagen-Smit and to Caltech's spirit of inquiry. I encountered Professor Haagen-Smit in writing my most recent book, The Quest. That book reflects the field of inquiry that I have carved out for my own work, Energy, which is really technology, innovation, interacting with markets and economics, with geopolitics, and indeed with history. And I thought I might draw a few lessons from that work as you think about your own future, at least lessons that I take away. The first, I'm tempted to say, and I have it written down here, is to follow your passions. That's a little bit of a cliche, and overused. So let's just say, just do what really interests you. You'll enjoy what you do more and have a bigger impact. When I look back, that's what I did without quite realizing that's what I was doing. After I finished my PhD, I had a 2-year postdoctoral. The only problem was that the topic that I was supposed to work on, I found progressively less interesting, which was a really scary thing for any researcher. But at the same time, the subject of energy, once relegated to the business pages that burst on the front pages and really engaged me. And in those 2 years, and I hate to say this, I had the great good luck that no one was supervising me. So I just began working and writing on it, and then unexpectedly I was offered an academic job where I could continue to pursue this interest. It wasn't what I expected to be doing at all, but I said to myself, I better take this because I'll never make that mistake again. So the second lesson flows from the first: take your opportunities when you're there. And that brings a story, well, as you know, a lot of people graduating from universities in the last few years have had trouble finding jobs. And this is a story of a young man who had graduated with a very good degree in science, though one of his professors had criticized him as a lazy dog, but he couldn't get a job. He tried to earn money as a tutor, got nowhere. His prospects looked so bad that his father actually wrote a letter to his chemistry professor saying, "Please help my son. He grows more and more unhappy day by day. He believes that his career has been permanently derailed." That was Albert Einstein. Then along came a job in the patent office in Bern. The workload was light, and over the course of one summer, Einstein wrote 5 papers that changed the world. So what's the moral of this story? When you're offered that job in the patent office in Bern, take it. Especially if it affords you the opportunity to do what really interests you. Einstein spent a lot of time at Caltech in the 1930s, and one of my favorite stories is when he was taken over to Warner Brothers studio to meet the president of Warner Brothers, Jack Warner, and they introduced him and said to him, "Mr. Warner, this is Professor Einstein. He's discovered the theory of relativity." And Warner said to him, "Professor Einstein, I have my own theory of relativity. Don't hire him." So, lesson 3, be curious, ask questions. It's true whether you're a researcher or go into a business. A few weeks ago, Jeff Immelt, the CEO of GE, identified curiosity as one of the key requirements for running a company on the scale and complexity of GE. Yes, ask the why and how and what's new and why not. The fourth lesson, so obvious but need to be reminded, is that things really do change. We're in a period of extraordinary economic change, when proud companies that rode one wave of innovation are being undermined by the next. This is a period that Mark Andreessen, the Netscape, the founder and venture capitalist extraordinary, describes as an era in which software means everything. So in this, try to see the changes early, try not to be too locked in, ask the what if, try to pick up the signals. But sometimes you don't see the future until it knocks you over. That's a big problem for the energy business. Because a great consensus forms in the energy industry about where things are going, everybody agrees, people invest and make decisions with great confidence. The only problem is the world changes, and dramatically. And this is a huge problem for an industry that is investing hundreds of billions of dollars with a 20 or 30-year time horizon. Let me explain. Just 10 years ago, the price of oil, a barrel of oil, was going to be $20 a barrel forever. Yet at that same time, economic growth in the emerging markets of China and India and others was changing the balance in the global economy, setting oil prices on a trajectory that would send them over $100 a barrel where they are today. Then in 2008, peak oil and peak natural gas were said to be at hand. We're going to run out of this stuff, and we're headed into an era of permanent shortage. Yet that very year, the unconventional revolution in oil and gas, shale gas and tight oil, began to make its impact felt. So today, the United States is gearing up to be one of the 3 largest exporters of liquefied natural gas in the world. And the International Energy Agency says that the United States is going to overtake Saudi Arabia and Russia as the world's largest oil producer. Moral of the story, things change. A fifth lesson that I take away from all the work that I've done over the years is a simple one. That's the power of conviction and the willpower to act on that conviction. These can be very important for achieving your results as a researcher or whether you go into business or other activities. And sometimes it can change the world. Steve Jobs is example number 1, as so superbly captured in Walter Isaacson's biography. You all know about him. But I have another example that will be unknown to most of you. It's a son of a Greek shepherd who had immigrated to the United States and settled in Texas. His name was George P. Mitchell, and he believed in natural gas. He believed that you could extract commercial natural gas from dense shale rock. The view throughout the industry was this was not possible. Anyway, for a decade and a half, starting in the early 1980s, Mitchell had his company labor away trying to figure it out. The people working for him said, "George, you're wasting your time, you're wasting your money." His answer, "It's my time and my money." But it took a decade and a half before the breakthroughs in hydraulic fracturing, known as fracking, and horizontal drilling finally succeeded. And it was not until 2008, he'd started in the early 80s, that it really took off, and boy, has it taken off. I've already cited how it's changed the energy picture in this country. The economic impacts are huge, over 2 million new jobs. And this was a period when the United States was heading into the worst recession since the Great Depression. In the wake of this unconventional revolution is an industrial renaissance in the United States, one that will offer opportunities for some of you. Because of its impact on lowering energy prices, it has suddenly made the United States a more competitive place in which to manufacture, at least for many companies. And now I should tell you, from Moscow to Beijing, the Arabian Gulf, people are beginning to ask what this change in the U.S. energy position means for geopolitics and for America's role in the world. In short, it's pretty amazing what the conviction of a single person can do. We're in a much better energy position as a country than seen half a dozen years ago, but with that, I don't want to leave you with the impression that everything is fine and safe. There's plenty of geopolitical risk and danger for the global energy system and indeed for the world, whether you look at Russia and Ukraine today, or you look at what's happening in Iraq or North Africa. And politics, as much as technology, will actually shape our energy future. The sixth lesson is try to be innovative. And what you have going for you, as you all graduate, is that the market and the culture today are more enabling and more forgiving of trying to be innovative than in the times past. One of my favorite characters in the quest is General George Doriot. Although he was a professor at Harvard Business School for 40 years, he became a general during World War II, really in charge of innovation. And after the war, he said that modern warfare is really applied science. He's also, more than anyone else, the father of modern venture capital. When Doriot returned to teaching after World War II, he also set up a company to fund innovations in a disciplined way. Or as Doriot put it, to interface on one side between large companies with resources but an inability to nurture innovation, and on the other, academics and inventors with creative ideas but no funds who are desperately trying to become poor businessmen. Today, venture capital is a critical infrastructure for our economy. Obviously, the locus has shifted from the Northeast to California, or a little north of here. And we would not have the remarkable innovation that has transformed our culture without this industry. And by the way, in years since, a number of academics have demonstrated that they can be pretty good business people too. Now, innovation can happen remarkably fast in the tech and digital worlds. In energy, it takes much longer. As Steve Koonin, the former provost of this university and former undersecretary of Energy for Science, has said, even accelerated energy transformation will take decades. Caltech is at the forefront of this, applying science to the energy needs of today and tomorrow, as reflected in the Resnick Sustainability Institute, JCAP, the Center for Sustainable Energy, and other programs, and in the outstanding professors who lead and participate in these programs, and those of you students who also participate. A lot of progress has been made on renewables, solar and wind, and I know at least one person on this platform who's advancing wind very importantly. But a lot of progress has been made since these industries were born more than 4 decades ago. The research being done today at Caltech may well prove critical for bringing down the costs, for the breakthroughs we don't yet see, for defining what our energy system will be not in 5 years or 10 years, but in 20 and 30 and 40 years. Of course, you all, as Caltech graduates, will have so many choices, so many different directions in which you can go. But in that regard, I do want to suggest that the world of energy has a lot to offer people with a Caltech education. There is this great moment of innovation. Never has there been such a focus on innovation in the energy business. There is a great issue of climate, what we do know and what we don't know about this extraordinarily complex system, and about mitigation versus adaptation. There are the sheer numbers and scale of what's ahead. Economic growth means rising demand for energy. To give you one example, in 2000, just 2 million new cars were sold in China. 2 million in 2000. We estimate at IHS in 2035, that number of 2 million will become 41 million new cars in 1 year. That tells you rising demand for energy. We need the technology to promote much greater energy efficiency, but we'll need supply. If the world economy doubles over the next 2 decades, well, that means that we will need maybe 35 or 40% more energy. Where will that energy come from? Today, 80% of world energy is oil, gas, and coal. Will it be very different 2 decades from now? What innovations, remarkable new innovations, will affect both the supply and demand side that will deliver the supplies that a world of rising incomes and falling poverty requires? Also, I should add, our energy systems will be part of a world which is moving, as one CEO has said, not into a brave new world, but a bad new world of cyber vulnerability, which is another aspect of the energy future. So from my parochial point of view, I hope that some of you will find that fulfillment in applying what you've learned here to the great energy challenges of tomorrow, you're needed. But of course, you're needed all across the economy and all across the spectrum of science and research and innovation. When I was finishing the quest, I happened to pluck from the bookcase a history of the internal combustion engine and saw a quote from Sadi Carnot. Now, the Carnot cycle is well known, but do you know much about Sadi Carnot? Actually, not much is known about him. He died at the age of 36 of cholera, and all of his notebooks would burn. But he was a French engineer and scientist who decided to explain how the steam engine worked. But he was interested in it not only because he was a scientist and an engineer, but because he was a soldier. Indeed, his father had been Minister of War under Napoleon, and he was convinced that one reason that the British had defeated the French in the Napoleonic Wars was that the British mastered this amazing new technology called the steam engine. So he wanted the French to understand the technology in order to restore their glory and their preeminence. Well, what caught my eye was what he said, that the advent of the steam engine constituted a great revolution in human affairs. Humanity had, for the first time, harnessed energy provided beyond that provided by the muscle of human and animals and wind and running water. So when we look at the sweep of energy developments since the 18th century, it can be seen as the unfolding acts of a great revolution, changing the world again and again. Standing in front of all of you, I'm conscious that, in fact, what I describe in energy, but is a subset of the Great Revolution, of science and engineering and mathematics, continuing to transform our entire world, providing the intellectual muscle power to stretch beyond the borders of imagination. So now, I run the risk of that unfortunate delegation from the island of Samos and their plea to the mighty power Sparta speaking too long. So let me conclude just by congratulating the parents and siblings and families and friends gathered here on the support you have provided to today's graduations on the day of celebration and the joy that you share in today. And to congratulate the teachers who have taught and prodded and mentored and most critically inspired these students here today. And most importantly, of course, congratulations to you graduates on what you achieved and what you will achieve in the future. We know the future is uncertain, but as I look out on all of you in your gowns, of one thing I am certain. As you graduate and go forward in the world, equipped with what you've learned at Caltech, with what you've learned at this great institution, wherever you go, you will make your distinctive contributions to the great revolution through the rest of this century, and indeed, help the world to stretch beyond the borders of imagination. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yergin, for sharing.